welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Darrell Grover, and I'm joined by a man who always flies first class. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello. I want to yes and you, but in actuality, literally never have I flown first class.
Same here. It's one of my ambitions is to fly first class, either because I can afford it or because someone puts me there.
And to paraphrase a Paul F. Tompkins joke, I was once told that like if you're really charming with the check-in person, and maybe you mention like, oh, I'm going abroad for the first time ever, or whatever, that you can talk your way into it. And I took the route of immediately break eye contact and then mumble things about my life until they say, okay, passport, please. So it hasn't worked so far. We'll see. I'll keep trying.
Keep working on it.
First class, please. And then I look away, and it doesn't work, surprisingly.
$10,000, please?
Oh, yeah, there's that.
Yeah, there's that too. Okay, so I mentioned that because it features in one of today's listener questions.
It sure does.
It's a listener question show. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 listener questions, each of them wonderful in their own way.
It's good counting, buddy. It's good counting.
I did it right. It's a type of counting that gets you into first class.
It
right?
is. And I love the first question coming from Michael Hastings Black. He asks, does Zlatan fly coach? No, coach flies Zlatan. Given the MLS rule about flying coach, what happens with very wealthy and or tall players who join Major League Soccer after having gotten famous elsewhere?
So this probably comes from the conversation I had with Zach Goldman last week. It'd be last Friday, talking about Zlatan to MLS. This was before he scored those 2 goals, and how you might end up seeing him on flying coach next to you. So the important thing is it's not about flying coach. It's more about chartered flights.
Right.
Those are the MLS rules, right? So should we maybe break this down for people who don't know the different terms? You can fly commercial, which is just the regular flights that you or I would find on the internet through some portal, and then book them. And you can charter.
I don't think any of them have ever advertised on the show, so we're keeping it vague.
But just in case one of them does, and then you can charter a flight, which is what most sort of big time professional teams will do, right? I'm assuming like an NBA team, NFL team, a lot of teams in Europe, soccer teams in Europe, they will charter a flight just for the team to go from place to place. So you don't have to go through the whole airport security, eating like bad buns with cinnamon in them situation, right? So we both did a bit of reading, right?
We've never flown first class. Have you ever eaten a Cinnabon, Darrell Grove? I had a feeling.
Specifically did not say Cinnabon.
I see.
You may notice.
A cinnamon bun.
Buns with cinnamon in them is what I said. It could be anything. So the Major League Soccer rule is that teams are limited to 4 chartered flights per season. A maximum of 4 chartered flights per season. There's a little wiggle room, right? That it can be approved for more, but basically it's 4 per season.
And the key other part there is season, meaning season of regular season and playoffs. So if you use up those 4 and you go to the playoffs, you're flying commercial, even if that's not going to be comfortable.
They're like timeouts. You got to use them wisely throughout the season.
And so I think that's what clubs do. I think we both read the article about Toronto and how Toronto tend to use one of their permitted charter flights to fly to Salt Lake because it can be difficult to find direct flights. But this time for the opening game, they did, and they were really excited because now they can save that one for later in the season, or more likely if and when they make the playoffs.
And so there are obvious reasons why chartered flights are more comfortable, right? You're on your own schedule. You can set it up all for yourself. You don't have to mix with the general public. I mean, I like the general public, but I can understand why if you're heading for a professional game, you don't want to be sort of, you don't want fans to see you, for one thing. You don't want to be subject to various delays that can happen to commercial flights for commercial reasons, right? So once you are flying commercial, you are then free to upgrade to first class, right? You absolutely can. If Zlatan wants to fly first class on all the LA Galaxy flights and leave some of his less well-paid teammates behind, because seriously, if you're earning $80,000 a year, which I'm not thinking of a specific LA Galaxy player, but that is a reasonable MLS wage, right? You're not going to want to spend an eighth of your paycheck to upgrade to first class, and you certainly can't do that throughout the season, right? Zlatan could afford that because he's got money in the bank. But there is then a weird thing of it becomes kind of like Bridesmaids, right? When you leave Kristen Wiig back in coach and you sort of put yourself above the rest of the team. So that's why a lot of players don't do it.
And that was a problem going back to like the Beckham experiment when Ruud Gullit took over the Galaxy, that I think they do get a certain allotment. Maybe that was just how the Galaxy did it, but some teams have a certain allotment of first class or business class tickets or what have you. And that it used to be like it was a rotating thing where everybody got them. When Ruud Gullit took over, it was like Ruud Gullit and David Beckham. And I think Kobe Jones maybe was the other one in there. But either way, it was like the big name people got the big name seats. I wouldn't be surprised if that continues, but it would be worth noting here, we talked to some people, and I think the other thing to remember is that it is not the commercial flying experience that you and I are familiar with. Is also worth noting. From what I have heard and read and had said to me, it is like you have people with the club who that's their job is to check in all the bags.
Logistics, travel logistics.
And then they do a lot to get you like the passes or whatever they are so that you can kind of go through security really quickly.
Global entry?
Yeah, and then I think that they have arrangements with specific airlines so that then you can maybe like go to that lounge. So it's essentially showing up, getting your ticket, walking through security, literally walking through security, I think, and then going straight to the lounge. Once you get on the plane, it sounds like there isn't necessarily a budget in place. It's just you can't charter a flight.
Yeah.
So what tends to happen is that while you may be traveling with 30 people, it's not like you have three to a row all the way back. Sounds like maybe you buy a lot more seats than you might need so everybody can still spread out.
So you don't get sort of a software salesman sitting in between you and your teammates.
Exactly, because that is what I pictured, is because the collective bargaining agreement stipulates that the players have to get window or aisle, that you can't be sat in the middle. And so then I did have this idea of like you and me just on a random flight, and suddenly it's like, oh, hey, Josie, hey, Michael. Well, that's not happening.
I have so many questions for both of you.
And I think their response would be to put on headphones and look the other way. But yeah, so it's
noise cancelling.
Yes. So I think you do get that where like you have more space than you might otherwise have in a packed flight. And then I forget, was it Clint Irwin, I think, who was saying that
Toronto goalkeeper. It's in a Toronto story.
He tries to get seated in the exit row so he gets a little more leg room. But
I know that. I do that.
Yeah. But I think at the end of it, it was Euro Movsisian said, there are worse places to fly than the United States, so you can make do.
He specifically referenced Russia, right? Yeah, it was harder to fly around there.
I like that you went for it. And like Tim Howard said, it's a business trip. That's how he treats it. So it's part of the job is you have to fly commercial.
But it does make it harder, right? And some people speculate it's why away teams have a worse record in Major League Soccer than in most leagues around the world. It's just harder to travel in the US.
I mean, there's no doubt about it because, again, that same article Greg Vanny was saying, it's an all-day thing. Even if you're only flying, a couple hundred miles, it takes up the entire day. With charter flights, I believe I'm correct in saying that every other professional sports league of the big ones in the United States, they all charter because you show up at the airport, you show up at the airport in your car or the team bus or what have you, and you get on the airplane and you fly to the place and you get off the airplane and you go to a hotel. You don't have to go through security and wait in the lounge. And it is commercial, so wait in the lounge, wait on delays. The gate might not be ready. You could have all sorts of issues that you wouldn't otherwise have.
So why does Major League Soccer limit teams to 4 charter flights per year? Why not? Because there's a perception of the league issue here, right? If you see Tim Howard on a commercial flight, I'd be sort of like, man, Tim Howard deserves better. American soccer deserves better, right? Major League Soccer deserves better. So why do they limit teams to 4 charter flights per year and make them fly commercial?
Well, I think for future sports movies, they want you to have those whoa, those were the days moments. Like when you see the Cleveland Indians on the terrible bus and you think oh yeah, that is how teams used to have to get around.
It's all for narrative.
Yes. No, it's not. It's for parody, you could say, or haves and have-nots, if you want to go that route.
Major League Soccer would say it's for parity to prevent the wealthier teams having luxury chartered flights everywhere, and then the less spendy teams having to sort of slum it with the rest of us on commercial airlines.
You didn't say cheap, so I'll say cheap. You have some teams who maybe don't want to do that, maybe don't want to buy the extra seats, and so you've got to make it possible for everybody to compete on the same level. I do think that ends sometime soon.
Yeah. It seems from what I've read that this is a point of contention between the different types of owners in Major League Soccer, that the owners who like to spend, and I mean, who likes to spend? Toronto likes to spend, the LA Galaxy likes to spend, Atlanta seems to have, basically the teams with the big name DPs. You would expect those organizations are all in for chartered flights. You should be able to do as many as you want. Everyone traveling luxury raises the level of the league. Then there are teams that don't spend as much money. I won't name any because I don't want to sort of insult fans or insult teams, excuse me. Essentially, they want it a cost control thing. They don't want to have to spend all that money to keep up. So it makes it easier and cheaper for them to run the team to not have to pay for charter flights. It's easier for them make their players fly commercial.
Yeah, I get that. But
so that's why they're in favour of the limit.
That's terrible.
It is, yeah. It's not good.
That's just that is 100% putting money before the safety and wellness of your players. Maybe not safety, but certainly the wellness, the ability to recover quickly. If you've got charter flights, every seat reclines, it turns into a bed, you can actually get some sleep as opposed to sitting in an upright position. I wouldn't be surprised if the next time we get to some collective bargaining, if there is a willingness on the part of the players to maybe not take gains elsewhere to get charter flights
that's
in there somewhere. Because I think, if I'm a professional athlete, I want to be able to just show up at the plane and go to a place. I don't, because given how much they have to travel and how long those journeys can be, again, to bring it home, that article had like Bradley Wright Phillips saying they like watched the whole movie and then was like, are we almost there? And they're like, no, you've got 5 more hours. He's like, what? He was not really ready for the length of that journey. Going? It was New York to Vancouver, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, which is like 800 miles longer than London to Russia, I think what that story cited, which is insane.
So it is that it's the hardest thing about playing soccer and having a league in the United States is the travel, right? For players and big. For the whole logistics. It is big. And it's almost like you're making it harder on the players by forcing them to, or capping the charter flights at 4p.
Yeah, and even weirder is that the charter flights also have to be on turf, which is odd. You wouldn't think that, but that's how they do it.
It's artificial turf on the...
Yeah. makes takeoff a difficult... Yeah, because then the plane gets turf toe and it's a whole thing. You hate to see it happen.
That's very funny.
Thank you.
All right. Next question is from Scott Glack. He wants to know, why do some soccer/football commentators call it the Mexican wave? So, worth clarifying, what is the Mexican wave? It's where you're in a stadium and sort of one section puts their arms in the air and stands up, and then it sort of it flows around the stadium, so it looks like a wave is happening around the stadium.
And somebody audibly says, "We're doing this," and then they kind of half-heartedly do it,
and then they're happy afterwards.
Yes,
that's why the
true.
Mexican wave is great. Scott says, "I'm all for our neighbours from the south, but I feel like this might be one thing that actually came from America. I was doing this as a child in baseball stadiums. Hopefully, I'm not wrong." Cheers. So why do some commentators call it the Mexican wave and not, for example, the American wave? I think I know the answer, but we haven't talked about this.
Here's a view behind the curtain on this one. Occasionally with listener questions, I'll read them and think like, I do not know the answer to this. This one I read and just thought, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this. Could be wildly wrong.
Have you researched, or is this a guess?
I have not researched.
Okay.
This is my guess, is that it's basically from when Mexico hosted the World Cup in 1986.
Yep.
When maybe that was when it was introduced to the rest of the world. I am assuming, I don't know if it came from Mexico, if it came from the United States, but I'm assuming it was a predominantly North American thing, that once it was hosted in Mexico, other people saw it. 1986, World Cup hosted in Mexico, so it becomes the Mexican wave.
Global television audience sees it happen for the first time at the 1986 World Cup in Mexico. Then especially English commentators call it the Mexican wave. I mean, that's how I'm familiar with it, right? We're watching Gary Lineker score a bunch of goals, and we're talking about the Mexican wave. I wasn't really around. I was too young to know what was happening. But that's where it comes from in sort of English soccer lore. And then I think a lot of American soccer commentary absorbs a lot of English stuff. So you'll also hear American commentators maybe call it the Mexican wave for that reason.
I call it the wave, and I feel better about that.
That's so it doesn't have to be tied to a specific country.
It does not.
Yeah.
It does not. And genuinely, it's because it makes me feel weird to be like, the Mexican wave. Like, it can just be the wave. We're doing the wave. That's fine.
I've called it the Mexican wave my whole life, so I'm kind of
Have you really?
stuck doing it. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
I guess that's who you are, Darrell.
So that is the answer to that question.
Thanks, Bert Hapley.
The answer to the next question will be revealed after we ask that question.
All right, and I will ask that question. It comes from Colin Marshall. Colin says, following his election, what exactly has U.S. Soccer President Carlos Cordero, that was good, done to improve U.S. soccer?
So, he was elected in February. It is now April.
Yep.
It's been about 2 months, right, since Carlos Cordero was elected. And there are a lot of things that we talked about immediately after the election that he could do quickly, right? Maybe appoint the GM, appoint the diversity officer that he had talked about. None of that has happened. But I would say that what he's been busy doing is the 2026 World Cup bid.
I would just add that I guess the wheels are turning on signing those GMs or hiring those GMs.
Are they?
Except that what we learned is that, the day after he was elected, U.S. Soccer, or maybe the day he was elected, U.S. Soccer Board voted to do that. So it feels like that was already something that was coming.
Yep.
And they've just authorized, I guess, the search to begin.
Yep.
So that is theoretically happening. But I'm not, I guess I bring that up only to say that I'm not sure that was him being like, all right, now let's make this happen.
Yeah.
it sort of felt
he
like...
He didn't stop it happening.
Yeah. It felt like me being like, I am declaring that it will be windy tomorrow, and I'm going to make that happen, because I checked the forecast, and it said it would be windy. So, yes, then we get to what he has done, and it does seem like he has been more involved in the 2026 bid than we previously anticipated.
So I checked his Twitter.
Yep.
He is, I think, CA Soccer on Twitter, and he basically, it's been a lot of meeting with the representatives from X country for the 2026 World Cup bid. So here's what happened. Sunil Gulati was the sort of chairman or head of the 2026 United World Cup bid between involving United States, Mexico, and Canada. Right, he was the point person on that. It seems that a decision was made. I don't know if this is at Cordero's request or not, but essentially they thought the bid would have more success if instead of emphasizing the centrality of the US, because the US is hosting most of the games, and it's the US soccer president was the face of it, to have the bid be headed by the three presidents of the three different federations. So essentially, Gulati steps down, still involved, but he's not the head of it. Cordero, alongside the president of the Mexican Federation and the president of the Canadian Soccer Association, are now the three heads of the bid. That means that's what Cordero has been doing for the past couple of months.
Yeah, and I think they're probably, while that makes sense because you want everybody to be involved, you want to show a unified front. When we heard Sunil Gulati talk about this in Philadelphia, Sunil Gulati is very good at not giving answers to questions if he doesn't want to give answers. He said, I am going to be heavily involved. I think he said, I will be chairing this bid. That's my priority. Once that bid is successful, then I'll step away for a while. So that he has stepped away prematurely means, number one, I think that they did want more people involved, but maybe number two, that he was invited to be less involved, is how I'm going to put that one.
And it seems that all this is a reaction to the bid not being as secure or as popular around the world as expected.
Wait, are you telling me that U.S. Soccer just assumed that things would work out and maybe took things for granted and maybe weren't as ready for stuff as they thought they were?
I mean, maybe a little
bit.
What? Yeah. So just
go jump out the window real fast.
Just so everybody knows. Just so everybody knows, June 13th is when we may get a result of the bid, right? Every FIFA nation gets a vote. It's pretty much a straight up and down vote, right? For every FIFA nation gets one vote. What we thought is that it's the US, Mexico, Canada bid, with US sort of heading it, and there's the Morocco 2026 bid, which looks a lot weaker because they don't have the infrastructure in place. They'd have to build a bunch of stadiums.
Because they're not a continent? Yeah.
Because they're not an entire continent.
And that is part of it, right?
The first 48-team World Cup is a big part of it, right? So it seemed okay, but then we've had stories come out recently that France is going to vote for Morocco, Algeria is planning to vote for Morocco, St. Lucia and Dominica, two Caribbean islands.
French Empire. It's a French Empire, Darrell.
For Morocco. Yeah, I think all those, obviously France has French ties, but all those nations have French or French-speaking ties. But St. Lucia and Dominica, CONCACAF nations. That's CONCACAF nations not supporting the bid of the CONCACAF teams.
And there's...
So it's all a little bit more shaky than we thought.
And there's some speculation about that. I think the truth is probably some combination of what you would expect. I think there are political reasons. I think that there are maybe some geopolitical issues. There are historical connections that maybe France has some sway there. And I think all of that could come to play.
And it comes at a bad time for the US, right? I know you were kind of hinting at it, but there's the prosecutions that came from the US for members of FIFA and other federations has not made the US popular. I'm still very convinced it was the right thing to do, right? To press charges and try and clean up soccer, right? To bring charges. And there's the current political situation where the US president is happily insulting a bunch of nations. That is not, I'm not going to say that's definitely the reason why people are will be voting against the US bid, but it's certainly not helping.
No, but one interpretation, not saying this is mine, but I'm saying this is an interpretation, is that these are two countries that were impacted by the recent hurricane season.
Oh, St. Lucia and Dominica.
And that they did not get any sort of assistance and did not get any sort of support. And maybe that factors into, well, then why should we give you a World Cup if you can't help out your CONCACAF brethren?
So that's what Carlos Cordero has been working on.
That's what they said, by the way.
But I think it might be like he's been playing whack-a-mole on the bid a little bit, trying to sort of get things closer to the finish line because they're farther away than they thought. Fair?
Yeah, I think so. And not to make it too depressing, sorry, listeners, but I'm starting to wonder. I'm definitely starting to wonder.
If this bid is successful?
And I can't tell if it's because of Trinidad combined with the way I was so sure that 2022 World Cup was coming here, and I was pretty confident that 2018 was going to England.
So was I.
And so I just remember that Grant Wall tweet, I think it was, or maybe he was live blogging it, but it was basically like, Sepp Blatter is shaking hands and laughing with the Qatari delegation. That can't be good. And there's just those little rumblings in there that are making me wonder, and I would be very sad.
Well, hold on.
Yep.
It's going to be white knuckle.
Yep.
Okay, elsewhere for US soccer, I did see an announcement today that they've announced biobanding is going to be a thing.
Yeah, can you explain?
biobanding?
I saw that headline and I thought that will be read later.
Okay, so biobanding is grouping young players together based on what they call their biological age, not their chronological age. And there is some scientific method where you can calculate sort of how big a person is going to be and what percentage of their full size they are at. And it doesn't matter if that person is 13 or 15, you sort of can group players together. Like a small 15-year-old could be playing with a large 12-year-old, for example, and they can be roughly physically similar. And the idea is to bioband means group people together not by their age, but by their maturity in terms of development. So then like physical advantages that sort of players who are big for their age have are removed, and you can just watch players based on sort of technique and their mental understanding of the game, right? And what they've announced today isn't like we're going to have a complete switch over to biobanding. It's just a series of sort of small tournaments involving some development academy teams, so you can see how this works. When you see like 13 and 15-year-olds playing together, if they're biobanded to be roughly the same physical maturity. Fair?
Yeah, it's fair in theory.
I don't know why I'm asking you. I'm really asking, do you understand the way I described it?
Yeah. You cut them in half and you count the rings, and then that's how you know?
No, Taylor.
Okay. I still think it's weird, though, because a 12-year-old who is very big is not like mentally as developed as a 15-year-old, and I imagine that is a big part. What am I saying? I imagine that is a big part of soccer. So it's kind of strange to think that, like, oh, but bigness is the key factor there.
Yeah.
Like, what, is Leo Messi going to play with the U15s? Like, how's that going to work?
Well, no, he is at 100% of his maturity,
okay.
right?
Oh, okay. I see.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, all right.
So it's at least an interesting experiment that US soccer is doing to see if this can sort of help. Because there might be some players that get lost because they're small and they're playing against a lot of other people that are bigger because they're not very physically mature.
Yeah.
There may be a great player that we miss there. Maybe a thing that the US is doing. Like, how many short players do you see playing for the US national team?
Crickets?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
so biobanding may be a way to address this. I'm not all in on it, but I'm definitely not all against it. I think it's something that's worth looking into.
I think everyone is short to you, Darrell. That's what I'm saying.
Me and Clint Owen looking down on everybody. I'm 3 inches shorter than Clint Owen.
Still taller than me.
All right, so that's what Carlos Cordero has been up to. I would say it's only been 2 months, so I'm not ready to be annoyed with Carlos Cordero just yet. He's still got time. If we're still waiting for him to do things after the World Cup, I think we're in trouble. But right now, I'm okay.
I'm not mad, and I'm not necessarily disappointed, but I think you're right that we had a conversation where we were sort of like, there are things he could do right away to make it clear that he's going to get stuff done. And to be relatively silent, like, I kind of was like, oh yeah, it's Carlos Cordero. I forgot. Like, we haven't seen him giving speeches involved in any of the friendlies. Like, you would think he would attend something or be there, and I'm assuming he did. He probably just wasn't on camera.
Here's the thing. One of the things we highlighted afterwards was he could hire the diversity director he was talking about. That hasn't been announced, but I would like to hope that there have been interviews or there's been a shortlist created. I would be very, very angry if that was completely just like, we'll do that later.
I hear it's Bruce
That's
Arena.
a thing that can wait. Oh, don't you?
Just antagonizing today.
Since you've raised it, can we talk about Bruce Arena's book?
Do we have to?
We do, because I'm not.
Right.
It's bad timing, right?
What is he doing?
I don't know what he's doing.
He is single-handedly, well, I guess who else would? He is running his reputation into the ground.
He really is,
And we
right?
talked about this, that like it used to be that if we saw him in a bar, we'd be like, Bruce, like 2002,
Yeah.
DC United, UVA, good stuff. And now it is like, I'm good. I'm good on Bruce Arena.
I'm even angry about the title.
Yep.
Have you seen the title?
No.
It's What's Wrong With Us, but us is in capital letters and surrounded by like a crest type thing. So it's meant to be like what's wrong with the US in terms of soccer, but it's all
Is this a troll now?
But it's all grammatically off, right? It doesn't even work.
Seriously,
It's what's wrong with US, doesn't it? It's the United States, right?
Yeah, and I can't tell if he's genuinely trolling or if it's an attempt to like maybe put the blame elsewhere and say like, hey, look, this wasn't on me. I did what I could. And weren't you even saying that there's like from the excerpts we've seen that it's a lot of like, no, I'm never one to say this, and it's probably not this, and I don't even believe this.
Specifically
but,
said, yeah,
and then the opposite of that.
He specifically said like, oh, I'm not one to blame this guy. It's not, exactly that kind of stuff. I don't place any weight in this. But we did play that game against Costa Rica at Red Bull Arena, where there's a large Costa Rican population, and I think that might have influenced the so he's trying to say it doesn't matter, but then he says it does, and there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on.
And it just frustrates me because there are ways.
This is angry Total Soccer Show.
It is. There are ways to be candid. There are ways to say,
just do it.
I messed up. I got this wrong. I thought I had this under control and I didn't. Mm-hmm. And that, especially given where he is right now, that's not going to hurt. No one is going to be like, oh, I totally thought he had it together, but even though we didn't qualify for the World Cup, and so I think he could have been more honest, and he had an opportunity to honestly assess things, and himself is part of that problem. And instead, it feels like it's been tone deaf in appearing on Fox for the first friendly, even appearing in the conference in Philly, where it felt like it was sort of a here I am, you may ask me questions, as opposed to I am here to have a frank and honest conversation about the state of American soccer. It just feels like this sort of, if I don't ever acknowledge that I have mud all over me, then I'm not technically dirty. It's just a strange approach to dealing with things.
The Emperor's clean clothes.
Yeah, something like that. Oh, man. So and I think at the end of it, it bums me out because, you and Travis last week on Top Drawer Soccer Show talked about, who does the U.S. have as iconic figures in soccer, right? And, I would have put, a couple years ago, I would put Bruce Arena on that list of, he has accomplished a lot. Yes, 2006 didn't go great, but I would take 2006 for 2002 any day of the week. Mm-hmm. And I do not have him on there anymore, and he is not a person who I see in that same light because of not just the failure to qualify, but the way he has kind of acted after that failure.
He wouldn't have done many things differently, is the other excerpt that's been coming out of this in the World Cup qualification campaign. All right. So the good news is, Taylor, we have 2 more questions to answer on today's show.
All right, I'm back in.
Next question. Mm-hmm. Oh, shouldn't do my Perd Happy voice again. We have another question on today's show. It is from Peter Evans. Peter Evans says, gentlemen, he must be thinking of someone else. Mm-hmm. Every time I play Tom Dunmore in Subbuteo, he beats me. As we are both very competitive humans, I do not appreciate his gloating or sly grins after his victories. Do you have any tips to help me beat Tom at his boyhood game?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Taylor, do you know what Subbuteo is?
I did not until I very, very briefly went to the website and read a little bit about it. So I will let you explain what Subbuteo is.
So it's very big in England. Or it was when I was growing up, at least. And it is essentially a table football game. Mm-hmm. So not like foosball with the sticks that you spin. It's sort of... you have a big sort of AstroTurf type thing, like a big fake grass field. And then you have tiny plastic men with a round base, and there's a soccer ball. And then on your turn, you can flick the men. So you have to flick the base at the ball, and that's how you dribble upfield and pass the ball. And you take it in turns flicking. Okay. Right? And then you sort of play soccer against each other in that way.
All right.
Flick the men at the ball, try and get down the field, try and score like that.
So 1 turn each, flick the player into the ball moves. Ideally, you're trying to score the goal, but ball moves off to the side, so then you've got to reposition your players, which I'm assuming means that you can't just pick them up, put them down by the ball.
No.
You've got to
literally flick the base of the player and move him forward. It's like a round base. The other thing to know here is we know who Tom Dunmore is, don't we?
We do.
Yeah, Tom Dunmore was one of the founders of the Chicago Fire supporter section. He was the communications director for Indy 11. He now works for Indy 500 or Indianapolis Raceway. He's one of those soccer Twitter, soccer journalist people. He used to write for pitchinvasion.net and 11 Quarterly.
Was on the show a very, very long time ago.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was indeed.
In terms of tips we might be able to provide, I would say you just practiced flicking just then or gave a demonstration of flicking. The website would say that you did that wrong, my friend.
Is that well? I was not very good at Subbuteo.
So this was interesting because I didn't really put this together that I would absolutely do it the way you did, which is sort of like you make the O and the 3 fingers and then you flick. Yeah. But they say you're supposed to have all of your fingers touching the table so that you have a more controlled flick than otherwise.
Actually, I did used to do it that way. It's been a long time since I played.
So these are the very basics ones.
Football Manager was invented in the meantime.
Yeah, and I think I'm giving the very basics ones that Peter may already know, but the other one is make sure the players are clean, because if they're cleaner, if they've been polished a bit more, I think they probably move a little bit easier.
Pre-match inspection?
Yeah.
But here's what I'm going to say is if you're not better than Tom at Subbuteo, then the only way to beat him is to cheat.
Exactly.
So here's what you got to do. You got to get some glue.
Yeah.
You maybe got to just put a little...
Is this really your solution?
Just a little bit of glue and get it under Tom's players just before you start playing, so that when he starts flicking his players, they just don't move as well as you think they might.
See, I thought I knew where you were going with this, but you're just straight up advocating cheating.
Absolutely.
And very obvious cheating, too.
Absolutely, yeah.
This is more obvious than Hand of God. This is... it's just... he was going to flick it. The player won't do anything. He's like, oh, they're glued to the table.
Yeah.
This has been corrupted.
You've got to cheat like an Australian cricket player. That's how you win this Subbuteo match.
That one went right over my head, which I think is in keeping with Subbuteo. But I think you also did have an idea about how you could win, which is maybe do a little bit of trash talking.
Yeah, so the other way is, so you can take the information you know about Tom, which is stuff we know, and you could say to him, hey, the University of Warwick is actually in Coventry. Maybe just give him a little trash talk. You could say to him, hey, the Indy 500 is just a poor man's Formula One.
I like that one.
You could say the Chicago Fire supporters section, it doesn't seem quite right. It seems like it was badly founded.
Ooh, that might be shots fired. That might actually throw him for a minute.
You could say Indy 11 isn't even the best team in Indianapolis.
Ooh, okay, I'm not touching that one.
Or Indiana, excuse me, Indiana.
Okay.
Statewide. Yeah, so maybe just lean into that.
I can't believe that I've just heard Darrell Grover advocate trash talking. That is not your style, but I'm excited to hear that it is now.
It's like the professional foul of Subbuteo.
Yeah, perfect.
That and glue.
But when you played, did you have any tips or tactics that you would employ? Would you aim for a certain way? Or?
I was so young, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just flicking the guys around and hoping to score.
I do think that's part of it, though. Is like if you're not taking it too seriously, if you're just a little bit laid back, then number one, you don't look as angry when you've lost. But number two, maybe that is part of it. Is like when you're like, I gotta score. Same thing as we've talked about with like Leroy Sana. If you're overthinking it, then you're not really playing the game.
Yes.
So maybe just don't think at all. I can't stress that enough. Put zero thought into this.
Put zero thought into this.
Switch your brain off. Take your turn.
I'm sure that'll
switch your brain back on. Trash and talk trash. Perfect.
Best of luck, Peter. Let us know if you do manage to beat Tom at Subbuteo. Please let us know.
Please do. Final question for today comes from Shreyas Ramani. Shreyas asks, 2 of the more successful international teams in recent time have been Germany and Spain.
2014 and 2010 World Cup winners.
Plus, you got some Euros in there, too. How much of their success do you think happened because a large portion of their roster played their club football together at Bayern Munich for the German team or at Barcelona, Real Madrid for the Spanish team? Or were they familiar with each other? Excuse me. Is that the sort of thing you try and make happen to create chemistry, or is it more of a coincidence? Yep.
So I'm not sure you can make it happen.
Nope.
I just think if it does happen, it's just the obvious thing to take advantage of it, right?
Yeah.
So if you think of the Germany Bayern Munich thing in 2014 is maybe the easiest example. You've got like Jerome Boateng, Philipp Lahm, I think Bastian Schweinsteiger was there, Thomas Muller is there. A lot of the core of the German team was at Bayern Munich, and they're all very successfully playing together. It just makes sense to sort of transplant that spine into your national team, right?
Yeah, I think so. And actually, I was set to not agree with that. But I think about it, not just these teams, but historically the teams that have been successful. The 94 World Cup team for the United States. We've talked about this before, but there's all the stories about how they basically didn't have a league. So they all just kind of toured around and played together and got to know each other. And there was really good chemistry because they're always together. Even some of like, I can't remember. I'm pretty sure they were. I should know this as a history major. But like Hungary was behind the Iron Curtain, correct? Yes. So that's a team where there weren't many options. It's not like they could go to all corners of the world and play different places.
Play for Honved.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But so you play for the same team, you get that familiarity, you build chemistry. I don't think it necessarily relates to like tactics or the way you approach the game, but just that if you're friendly with a person before you step on the pitch, then you're friendly with that person versus you're introducing yourself as the game kicks off.
Well, get ready. I think I might be about to blow your mind.
Okay.
All right, so we just talked about that Germany team in 2014.
Yep.
You know who their coach was for Bayern Munich?
Jupp Heynckes?
Pep Guardiola.
Oh, it's Pep Guardiola in 2014. You're right. In
2010, that World Cup winning team for Spain was mostly formed around the Barcelona midfield.
Oh, boy.
Of Busquets, Xavi, Iniesta. Defenders were Puyol and Piqué. Pedro was also involved. You know who the Barcelona coach was?
Jupp Heynckes.
Pep Guardiola. So, at least in the evidence of just thinking about Germany and Spain, it really is. If you've got a successful team that Guardiola is coaching,
what could you possibly be setting up here, Darrell?
You've got to take that core and run with it. Well, here's where this is interesting. I honestly think Guardiola aside, with Spain and Germany, it was the obvious thing to do because those Barcelona and Bayern Munich teams were sort of really, really in good form, right? That was when Barcelona were dominant. And even you can add in those Real Madrid players like Sergio Ramos, and you're looking pretty good, right? The question is, I'm thinking specifically of England, because that's the thing where there's not an obvious team, right?
Yeah, I think
you take that Man City team, it's a Guardiola team, it's dominant in England. It doesn't have that sort of pure core of English players that are an obvious transplant to the national team in the way that Busquets, Xavi, Iniesta were.
No, but I think what you could argue is that like the coaches, was it Luis Aragonés
for Spain in 2010? Yes.
Yeah. So I think
no, it was Aragonés in 2008.
Yeah.
Then it was Del Bosque in
Del Bosque.
2010.
Thank you. There we go.
I think.
But so not that important because my point was going to be that Vicente Del Bosque and then Aragonés and then Jogi Löw. I would say maybe there's a chance that they adapt what they do to fit the dominant teams coming in.
Well, Spain looked a lot like Barcelona in that era.
Yeah, and so I think, though, if you then look at England for a second, that is sort of what Southgate is doing. He's adapting England. He's changed them to look more like Man City, Liverpool, Tottenham, where it is high intensity, high pressure. You've got the attacking wing backs. And so even then I would say that, yeah, it kind of does make sense that I do think that's partially Pep Guardiola's influence. But if, a lot of players from those three teams are going to be with that England team, it makes sense to have them all kind of playing the same style.
And I guess, you can't take one team like you could with sort of Bayern Germany, but you can do what you just said and take elements that sort of fit together, right? And so you can have Eric Dyer, Dele Alli, Harry Kane. You can maybe have all those together. But you take, Kyle Walker and John Stones from Man City, but you maybe wouldn't take Fabian Delph. I don't know. We'll see if that happens or not.
We'll see. Phil Foden, get him in that plane.
Phil Foden, Raheem Sterling, you definitely take, right? Yeah. And then Liverpool, we had that midfield that we were so impressed with against Man City.
No James Milner, obviously.
No James Milner, but Henderson and Oxlade-Chamberlain. Oh, we had a question. Why do we call him James Milner? I feel like we've just been doing it without explaining it.
Oh, did we?
Yeah.
Oh, it goes back to 2014, I think, right?
Yeah.
The 2014 World Cup, where that was kind of the breakout, at least for us, of James Rodriguez.
Yep.
And I think
spelled James Rodriguez.
Yeah, and I think we called him James a little bit at the very beginning, and so we were destroyed on Twitter, and we switched to James. And then I can't remember if it was you or it might have been like Peyton or
I think
Albert.
It was Peyton and Albert started, because they're Liverpool fans, they started calling James Milner James Milner.
Yep, and that's where it comes from.
I think somewhat mockingly at the time, but now all of a sudden Milner's running the Champions League.
Yeah, where he had to come out and publicly say, I'm not coming out of retirement, because people were maybe starting to speculate. Yeah. So, but you do have Joe Gomez, who comes from Liverpool. We talked about Oxlade-Chamberlain. We talked about Jordan Henderson. You still have Nathaniel Klein, who's theoretically possibly maybe involved in there. We shall see. But so you do still have a decent amount of English players coming out of those clubs who could form up the spine of that England team.
So, how about in a more theoretical
And then also
way?
a goalkeeper will be there.
It's the Everton keeper.
Yeah.
To Shreyas' question, is it worth trying to force this, or should you only do it organically? Like, for example, I don't know if England's necessarily the best example, but would you discard a certain really high profile or really talented player in order to take the sort of core of a more successful club team? Or is it not worth following this to that extent?
I mean, I'll say it depends, but I'll say specifically it depends on, number one, if that core team that you might be bringing in fits what you want to be doing. If you want to play a controlled, contained, park the bus defensive style, then you're not going to want to bring in the high pressure, high intensity, possess players. So maybe you wouldn't drop a player who fits your system there. And then I think the other one is that if you have such a talismanic player that you wouldn't drop Leo Messi because you want to play a certain way. There are certain players that I think they're in there no matter what, and it doesn't make sense to exclude them. That
makes sense to me. I just had a mental flash of 2008. I believe Raul, the striker, retired from international duty. And essentially did Spain a favour, allowed them to play a more Barcelona-ish system. Because for all Raul's qualities, he's very much a poacher. He's not going to sort of close people down or do any of that running. You know what I mean?
and maybe that was behind the scenes, hey, you can retire or you cannot be called up. But I think actually thank you, because the other point I wanted to make was where this isn't necessarily in relation to Shreyas' question, but I do think that the most successful managers are the ones who are able to make that tough decision. And the one that always comes most readily to mind, maybe just because we were talking about England, is the Lampard-Gerrard thing of you're going to get criticism no matter what, so choose one. Because they're both not going to fit. That much is obvious. You got to kind of make that call.
He chose not Paul Scholes, which in hindsight is the worst possible decision.
Yeah, that wasn't a very good choice by him. Not a very good choice. But that is where I think that if you have, say, 4 players who are playing a certain way that kind of fits with what you want to do, but you have a slightly more famous player who kind of fits, but you're not as familiar with, but isn't one of those 4 players, maybe that player gets dropped because you've got that core, you can build around that core.
There we go. I think we've fully answered that question.
I hope so.
That question got answered hard. All right. So thank you to Michael.
But
Scott.
Hungary was behind the Arrow curtain.
I'm pretty confident, yes.
No, they definitely were.
Thank you to Michael, Scott, Colin, Peter, and Shreyas for today's questions. If you would like to send a question, it's totalsoccershow.com/questions, plural, totalsoccershow.com/questions to leave us a question. If you subscribe to the show and support us financially at totalsoccershow.com/join, if you subscribe at $10 a month or more, we guarantee to answer one question per month on the Total Soccer Show.
Sure do.
Lots of great questions in the bank ready to answer. We'll do more next week.
And if your next question is, do you like Bruce Arena? Then that allows us to do an entire show on one question.
Will you read his book?
Probably not.
I'm weirdly tempted to, but the excerpts I've seen so far I can see being really frustrating and not actually offering any insights.
And my response to that is that Darrell reads books pretty consistently. I don't read as much as I should. And
I feel like you read more than me.
And I don't think so. I read things. I think there's about 8 books that I've read about 30 pages of.
Okay.
I don't know if the book that I want to have completed most recently is Bruce Arena's. I don't know if he gets that distinction.
That's fair.
Which is obviously the honor that he's looking for.
Actually, since we're talking about it, can we talk about this now? There was one thing that I think was in the book and has since been confirmed, which is that US Soccer were planning to replace Jurgen Klinsmann with Bruce Arena before the Copa America Centenario in 2016. He actually was going to be offered the job a lot earlier because of the way things are going. But then Dan Flynn, who's the CEO or chief exec, CEO, had heart problems, and so it was all delayed because of that. Did you have a heart transplant, I believe?
What do you think CEO means?
Chief Executive
there we go.
Officer? Yeah. Why?
Because you said he was either the CEO or the chief exec.
Oh, yeah, okay. Fair enough. Oh, let's make fun of Darrell Day. Wonderful. Happy Friday, everybody. But that was one of the reasons why it was delayed, and also that's one of the reasons why this GM position, which we referenced earlier, is going to be created so that sort of, instead of it being a sort of communal decision and where one important part of that commune is out of action, they can't make the decision. Instead, you've got one guy who is fully responsible for it.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's good. I still am annoyed with Bruce Arena for saying that stuff. I'm also annoyed with some of the responses I've seen, though, from people saying, like, see, this is why we shouldn't have gotten rid of Jurgen Klinsmann for 2 bad performances. That is a very selective way to look at the tenure of Jurgen Klinsmann.
It is.
And also, if you want to go that route...
if you haven't seen the CONCACAF Cup game.
Yes. Or even, to your point, that they almost got rid of him before the Copa America Centenario, which was before those 2 bad games. Yep. It's not as though they just, out of nowhere, decided this isn't working. There were obvious signs even back then.
Oh, okay. Hindsight.
Yeah.
Is the 2016 Copa America Centenario a success or not? Because I was always conflicted about it because we made the semi-finals, but we sort of semi-collapsed against Colombia in that first game and got absolutely destroyed by Argentina when I don't think we had to be in that semi-final. It was something of an embarrassment, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you go back to it, we talked about it at the time. I think we gave more credit to Michael Bradley than Jermaine Jones, but it felt like those two were sort of making a lot of the choices.
Oh, there was the thing on the sideline of Bradley and Jones talking to Klinsmann, right?
And very emphatically saying, like, this is not working, this needs to change. And then you look at some of the individual errors. Like, I think even recently we were like, was that the game where DeAndre Yedlin got 2 yellow cards, or was that the game where he conceded a needless penalty? Like, there were individual mistakes that I think indicated a lack of cohesion and leadership. I mean, I think even
it was the pinnacle of run fast, try hard, like punch them in the mouth, be aggressive, but without really thinking about how it all fit together.
Why are we reliving this?
I'm sorry.
I think, wasn't that literally like what he said to Christian Pulisic when he came on in that competition? Was like, go out there, have fun, do your best.
Yeah, try and make something.
And it's like and then again juxtapose that with Jose Mourinho, for example, with his like just binder of information about what I want you to do in this situation and that situation versus like, just go try hard. I'm sure something will happen. It is the definitive example of if we put a bunch of talented players on the field, something's got to happen, right? And that is not how it works.
I would love an honest book from Arena and an honest book from Klinsmann where we could really hear about, like, essentially I'd love just the reasoning behind certain decisions, right?
I feel like those books are both going to be one of the same when Michael Bradley writes his book.
I would buy Michael Bradley's book tomorrow. Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
I would pre-order.
Yeah, maybe Tim Howard's book too. Who knows? We shall see.
Yeah, also that. All right. Thank you to everybody for the questions. Once again, it's totalsoccershow.com/questions if you want to leave one for us. Thank you, Taylor Rockwell, for taking the time to talk to me today.
Right back at you, buddy, and sorry for picking on you.
Oh. All right. Lots of action to watch this weekend.
I was sincere.
Oh, was it? Okay. Sorry.
It's Friday. I don't want you to be sad.
It was sarcastic. Lots of action today, because we're recording this early, right? This Friday show. But Friday at 2:45 Eastern, it is Cardiff versus Wolves, 1 versus 2 in the Championship. Not in that order, though. It's also the Liverpool derby, the Merseyside derby this weekend, Everton-Liverpool, and it's the Manchester derby where Man City may be crowned Premier League champions.
No comment.
No comment. All right. We'll be back to review all of that after the weekend. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you again after the weekend.